heavy steel door of my basement shop didn't just open, it was kicked off its hinges with a crack that sounded like a gunshot. I didn't have time to scream before a gloved hand slammed against my mouth, pinning my head back against the cold brick wall. "Don't make a sound, Sloane," a voice hissed. It was a man in a tactical mask, his eyes flickering with a desperate, jagged energy. Behind him, two others dragged a heavy, slumped figure across the concrete floor. I watched, frozen, as they hoisted the body onto my heavy oak cutting table, the same table where, only hours ago, I had been delicately pinning a vintage Dior gown. Now the surface was being stained by a dark, viscous pool of crimson. "He needs a surgeon," I managed to gasp as the man let go of my throat. My heart was a frantic bird trapped in my ribs. "No doctors, no hospitals," the lead man growled, shoving a suppressed pistol into the space between my eyes. The cold metal felt like an ice cube against my skin. "We heard you're the best, that you can hide any flaw, any scar, any secret in a suit. He has a summit at the plaza in 50 minutes. If he shows up with a single drop of red on his shirt, a war starts tonight. You're going to fix the hole, and then you're going to build him a new identity." Now, I looked down at the man on the table. He was Korean, with features so sharp they looked carved from obsidian. This was Kenji Sato, the Ghost King. I had seen his face in the wanted files my father used to keep. His charcoal suit jacket was shredded, and a bullet had carved a jagged path through his side. "Get my trauma kit, not the sewing one. The heavy-duty upholstery thread," I commanded. My voice was shaking, but as my fingers touched the fabric, a strange, icy calm took over. I wasn't just a designer anymore. I was a field medic in a war zone of silk and steel. I ripped his $200 silk shirt open, the buttons scattering across the floor like plastic hail. I didn't have anesthesia. I grabbed a bottle of high-proof vodka from my cabinet and poured it directly into the raw, open wound. Kenji's eyes snapped open. They weren't clouded with agony. They were terrifyingly lucid, glowing like embers in the dim basement light. He lunged upward, his hand locking around my wrist with a grip that threatened to snap the bone. "Do it!" he rasped, his voice a low, guttural vibration that I felt in my own chest. I didn't flinch. I stared right back into those predatory eyes. "You're bleeding on my imported velvet, Mr. Sato. If you want to make your meeting, sit still. I have a reputation to uphold, and you're currently my most difficult client." A slow, lethal smirk touched his bloodless lips before he slumped back, allowing me to work. I stitched him with the precision of a master tailor, closing the skin with high-tensile silk thread. Then I grabbed a bolt of white Egyptian cotton. I didn't use a pattern. I draped the fabric directly onto his chest, my shears flying, the blades singing as I cut a custom tuxedo shirt directly onto his body. 40 minutes later, he stood up. He looked impeccable. The shirt fit his muscular frame perfectly, the thick reinforced pleats over his ribs hiding the bandages so well that no one would ever suspect he was minutes away from internal hemorrhaging. He didn't thank me. He reached into his pocket and tossed a heavy, ancient gold coin onto my cutting table. It landed with a dull thud on the blood-stained wood. "Sloane Montgomery," he said, reading the name on my dusty business card. "The world thinks you're a ghost, but I think you're a goddess. I'll be back for the final fitting. Don't move." I watched them vanish into the blizzard, the SUVs roaring away like predators into the night. I stood there, trembling, looking at the coin. It was a life debt token, but as I reached for the light switch to finally lock up, I noticed a tiny, flickering red laser dot dancing on the center of my white apron. My breath hitched. I looked toward the darkened window of the building across the alley, and my blood turned to ice. The red laser dot vanished as quickly as a heartbeat. I hit the floor, my cheek pressing against the cold, blood-specked concrete, but the alley remained silent. The Ghost King was gone, leaving me with a gold coin and a target on my back. I didn't sleep. I spent the night scrubbing the oak table until my knuckles bled, the scent of antiseptic and expensive tobacco stinging my lungs. By dawn, the blizzard had turned the city into a white tomb, but I had a more pressing problem. My sister's tuition bill sat on the counter, glowing with the red ink of a final notice. I took the gold coin to a high-end fabric wholesaler in the garment district. I didn't want to sell it, but I needed liquid capital to buy the silk for my next contract, if I lived that long. The shop was a cathedral of cashmere and lace, owned by the Vane family. As I reached for a bolt of midnight blue silk, a sharp heel clicked against the marble floor, stopping inches from my hand. "Sloane, I thought I smelled something rotting." I didn't have to look up to know that voice. Chloe Vane, my former mentor and the woman who had surgically removed my name from the industry, stood there draped in a fur coat that cost more than my basement. She looked down at my worn coat and my stained fingers with a look of pure, unadulterated disgust. "This section is for premier clients, not for charity cases," Chloe sneered. her voice carrying across the quiet showroom. A group of socialites stopped their browsing, their eyes turning into judgmental needles. "I'm here to buy, Chloe, just like everyone else," I said, my voice steady even as my stomach performed a slow, sickening roll. "With what? Buttons and pocket lint?" Chloe laughed, a jagged, brittle sound. She grabbed a cup of steaming espresso from a nearby tray and with a casual flick of her wrist, tilted it. The dark liquid splashed across the bolt of silk I was holding and then onto my chest. I gasped, the heat searing through my thin sweater. "Oh, look, now it's ruined, just like your career," Chloe whispered, leaning in so only I could hear. "I told you to stay in the gutter. If I see your face on 7th Avenue again, I won't just ruin your reputation. I'll make sure that little sister of yours loses her scholarship." The room blurred. My hands shook, not with fear, but with a cold, ionizing rage. The socialites giggled behind their manicured hands. I was a ghost, a joke, a stain on their marble floor. I turned to leave, the weight of the gold coin in my pocket feeling like a lead brick. Suddenly, the heavy glass doors of the wholesaler swung open. The giggling stopped. The air in the room didn't just cool, it froze. A man in a charcoal suit, followed by 6 others who moved with the coordinated grace of wolves, stepped into the light. It was Kenji's lead lieutenant, the man who had held the gun to my head. He didn't look at the fabrics. He didn't look at Chloe. He walked straight to me and stopped, bowing his head slightly. The entire showroom went silent enough to hear the falling snow outside. "Miss Montgomery," the man said, his voice a low thunder. "Mr. Sato was displeased with the quality of the thread you used last night. He felt it was beneath your talent." Chloe stepped forward, her face a mask of confused arrogance. "Excuse me, who are you? This woman is a fraud. The lieutenant didn't even turn his head. He snapped his fingers. One of his men stepped forward, handing a black briefcase to the shop manager, who was trembling so hard he nearly dropped it. "Inside is a certified check for $10 million, the lieutenant announced, his eyes finally moving to Chloe with a look of lethal indifference. "Mr. Sato has just purchased this entire building, the inventory, and the land it stands on. It is a gift for Miss Montgomery." Chloe's jaw dropped. The coffee cup fell from her hand, shattering against the marble. "And as for you," the lieutenant said, looking at the manager, "Miss Montgomery is now your employer. Her first order is to ensure that this woman," he pointed at Chloe, "is barred from the premises, permanently. And if she ever touches Miss Montgomery again, the Vane family will find their stock prices hit the floor faster than that cup." I stood there, the wet heat of the coffee still on my skin, watching Chloe Vane get escorted out of her own family's store by 2 men who looked like they enjoyed their work. The lieutenant turned back to me, his expression softening by a fraction of a millimeter. "Mr. Sato is waiting in the car. He says the final fitting needs to happen now. And Sloan, he doesn't like to be kept waiting." He turned and walked out. I looked at the manager, who was now bowing so low his forehead nearly touched the floor. I looked at the blue silk, now ruined. I realized then that I hadn't just been saved, I had been claimed. I walked out to the curb where a black Rolls-Royce sat idling. The window rolled down just an inch, revealing a pair of obsidian eyes that seemed to burn through the glass. "Get in," the voice commanded. I reached for the handle, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I pulled the door open, but as I stepped inside, I saw something on the floorboard that made my breath catch. It was a photograph of my father, and it was pinned to the leather seat with a blood-stained tailor's needle. The interior of the Rolls-Royce smelled of expensive leather and something metallic, like the ozone before a storm. I sat as far from Kenji as the seat allowed, the photograph of my father clutched in my trembling fingers. The blood-stained needle was still stuck through his chest in the picture, a grim signature that made my throat tighten. "Where did you get this?" I demanded, my voice cracking. Kenji didn't look at me. He was staring out the window at the blurred gray streets of Manhattan. "Your father was a master of more than just suits, Sloan. He designed the vault for the Kurayama Syndicate. He knew where every secret was buried, and he died because he forgot that secrets don't like to be shared." "My father died in a hit and run," I whispered, the lie I'd told myself for years feeling ash dry in my mouth. "He died because he was a lion who thought he could outrun a pack of wolves," Kenji said, finally turning to face me. His obsidian eyes moved to the coffee stain on my sweater. His jaw tightened. "Tonight is the mayor's charity gala. The Vane family is hosting. You will be there." "I was blacklisted, Kenji. I can't walk through the front door of the Metropolitan Museum without being arrested." "You aren't going as a guest," he said, a cold, predatory smile playing on his lips. "You're going as the help. Humility is a suit that Chloe Vane expects you to wear. Let her believe she's won, until the moment she realizes I've already burned her." Kingdom down. 3 hours later, I was standing in the cavernous, marble-clad cloakroom of the Met. I was dressed in a standard black and white server's uniform, my hair pulled back so tight it made my eyes ache. I had spent the last hour taking heavy furs and cashmere wraps from the very people who had cheered when I was ruined. "Coat, now, and don't get your greasy fingers on the lining," a sharp voice barked. I looked up. Chloe Vane stood there, glowing in a gown of gold lame, a design she had stolen from my own sketchbook 3 years ago. She didn't recognize me at first, but then she saw the scar on my wrist from a childhood accident. Her eyes widened, then crinkled with a malicious, triumphant glee. "Sloane, oh, this is poetic," Chloe laughed, leaning over the counter. "From the runway to the cloakroom, I heard about the little stunt in the fabric shop. But I see your sugar daddy has already grown bored of you. Back to being a maid, I see. Just give me your coat." "Chloe," I said, my voice like frozen glass. She unpinned a massive white fox fur stole and dropped it not into my hands, but onto the floor at my feet. "Pick it up, little tailor, and make sure it's separate from the commoners' coats. It costs more than your life." I knelt. My knees hit the hard marble, and the hum of the gala in the next room felt like a mocking roar. But as I reached for the fur, a pair of polished black Oxfords appeared in my field of vision. The air in the cloakroom seemed to vanish. "Is there a problem here?" The voice was a low, dangerous rumble. The socialites in line behind Chloe suddenly scattered like pigeons. Kenji stood there, looking like a god of death in the tuxedo I had stitched onto his body in a basement. He didn't look at Chloe. He looked down at me, still on my knees. "Mr. Sato," Chloe chirped, her voice instantly changing to a high-pitched, desperate flirtation. "I'm so glad you're here. I was just dealing with this incompetent girl. She's lucky I don't report her for—" Kenji stepped over the fur stole on the floor, ignoring Chloe entirely. He reached down, his gloved hand taking mine and pulling me to my feet with effortless strength. "Why is the woman who owns this museum's new wing standing behind a counter?" Kenji asked, his voice carrying into the main ballroom. The music stopped. The mayor and the city's elite turned to look. "She doesn't own," Chloe started, her face turning a sickly shade of grey. "The Vane family defaulted on their museum endowment this morning," Kenji said, finally looking at Chloe with eyes that promised an early grave. "I bought the debt, and I've transferred the naming rights to the Montgomery Foundation." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a long velvet box. He opened it to reveal a necklace of black diamonds that looked like drops of frozen night. He draped it around my server's collar, the cold stones burning against my skin. "I don't need my coat checked. Sloane," he whispered, loud enough for every camera in the room to catch. "I need my partner. The gala is starting, and you have a speech to give." I looked at Chloe, whose gold gown now looked like a tattered rag. I looked at the black diamonds. But then, over Kenji's shoulder, I saw a man standing in the shadows of the Egyptian wing. He was wearing a mask, and in his hand, he held a single, red dragon gold coin. The world slowed to a rhythmic, suffocating crawl. I saw the glint of the barrel first, a sliver of cold steel peeking from behind a granite sphinx. The masked man didn't hesitate. I didn't have time to think, only to react. I lunged, my hand grabbing the heavy lapel of Kenji's tuxedo and pulling him with a force born of pure adrenaline. The thwip of the silenced round was almost silent, but the explosion of the marble pillar behind Kenji's head was not. Shards of stone sprayed like shrapnel. I felt a sharp sting across my shoulder, but I didn't stop. We hit the floor. Together, the black diamonds around my neck clicking against the floor like counting beads. "Down! Get down!" Kenji roared, his calm mask finally shattering into something raw and feral. The gala erupted into a symphony of shattered glass and high society screams. Security teams in black suits swarmed the room, guns drawn, but the assassin in the shadows was a ghost. He melted into the darkness of the Temple of Denda, leaving only the scent of ozone and the red dragon coin spinning on the floor. Kenji pinned me beneath him, his body a living shield. His breathing was heavy, his heart hammering against my chest. For a moment, we were the only two people in the world. "Are you hit?" he demanded, his hands framing my face with a grip that was surprisingly gentle despite the chaos. "I'm fine," I wheezed, my eyes fixed on the blood-stained tailor's needle I had seen in the car. "Kenji, who was that? Why did he have a coin like yours, but different?" He didn't answer. He stood up, pulling me with him. His face was no longer that of a businessman or even a mafia boss. He looked like a god of war who had just been handed a reason to burn the world. Chloe Vane was cowering near the buffet table, her gold dress stained with spilled champagne. Kenji walked toward her, each footfall sounding like a death knell. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. He didn't say a word. He simply reached into the velvet box I had dropped and pulled out a single, uncut black diamond. "You wanted Sloane to kneel," Kenji said, his voice a terrifying whisper that carried further than a shout. "But it seems the floor is covered in more than just fur now." He dropped the diamond into the mess of broken glass at Chloe's feet. "The assassin who just fired that shot was on the Vane family payroll," Kenji announced. The room gasped. Chloe's face went from pale to translucent. "I have the wire transfers. I have the logs. Your father thought he could use my allergy to people to keep me away. From the truth, he thought a bullet would solve the debt." Kenji leaned in, his shadow engulfing Chloe. "Pick it up, on your knees. Every piece of glass your family broke today, you will pick it up." I watched as Chloe Vane, the woman who had spent 3 years ensuring I was a ghost, sank to her knees. Her gold dress tore against the shards. Her manicured fingers bled as she reached for the black diamond. It was the face slap I had dreamed of, but there was no joy in it, only the cold realization that I was now the center of a hurricane. Kenji turned back to me, ignoring the sobbing woman on the floor. He saw the red line of blood on my shoulder where the stone had grazed me. His expression darkened. Without a word, he swept me into his arms, carrying me toward the exit as if the mayor and the media didn't exist. "Where are we going?" I asked, burying my face in the tuxedo I had stitched with my own hands. "To the only place left that hasn't been compromised," he said. "My home, and—" "Sloane, you're going to help me find the man behind that mask, because he didn't just try to kill a king, he tried to destroy my masterpiece." The interior of the SUV felt like a pressurized chamber. Every time I looked at the screen, my heart stuttered. My sister Nina was wide-eyed and trembling, the cold steel of my own heavy-duty fabric shears pressed against her jugular. The man holding them was the same shadow from the museum, the one with the red dragon coin. "Kenji, do something! Drive faster!" I screamed, lunging for the door handle as if I could run across the city on foot. Kenji's hand clamped onto my shoulder, pinning me back into the leather seat. "If we rush in, she's dead. This isn't a kidnapping, Sloane. It's a lure. Look at the way he's holding those shears. He's a professional. He knows exactly where the carotid artery is. He's in my shop. With my tools," I sobbed, the irony of my life being destroyed by the instruments of my craft, feeling like a physical weight. Kenji turned to his lieutenant. "Signal Team B. Tell them to wait for my mark. If a single hair on that girl's head is touched, I want that entire block leveled." He turned back to me, his eyes softening into something almost human. "I am going in alone. You stay in the car." "The hell I am," I snapped, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. "That's my sister, and I'm the only one who knows the layout of that basement. There's a hidden service tunnel behind the industrial dryer. If you go through the front, he'll see you on the security monitors I installed." Kenji paused, searching my face. Then he nodded once. We arrived at the alleyway 10 minutes later. The snow was falling in thick, silent sheets, muffling the sound of the world. We slipped through the service entrance, the air smelling of damp concrete and old laundry detergent. As we reached the heavy steel door of the inner sanctum, Kenji stopped. He leaned against the wall, his breathing becoming shallow and ragged. His face was flushed, and a fine sheen of sweat broke out on his forehead. I watched in horror as his hand began to tremble. "Kenji, what's wrong?" I whispered, reaching out to touch his arm. "Don't," he hissed, recoiling as if my touch were a hot iron. I have a condition, hapaphobia. It's not just a dislike of being touched, Sloane. It's a systemic shutdown. My father, he used to train me by locking me in rooms with people who were paid to never let me go. Now, my body treats human contact like a lethal pathogen." I looked at him, the Ghost King, the man who held the city in a fist of iron, and realized he was a prisoner of his own skin. "But you touched me at the museum. You carried me because you were bleeding," he rasped, his eyes fixed on the door. "My brain overrode the panic because you were part of the work. But now, the adrenaline is fading. If I go in there and he touches me, I'll seize." I looked at the door, then back at the man who had just bought me a building and saved my life. I reached out again, not for his arm, but for his hand. I wrapped my fingers firmly around his, forcing him to meet my eyes. "I am not a pathogen, Kenji. I'm the woman who stitched you back together. Focus on my hand. Focus on the silk thread. You're not a victim in a locked room anymore. You're the king." For a long, agonizing second, I thought he would strike me. Then, his fingers slowly closed around mine. The trembling stopped. His breathing leveled out. The allergy hadn't vanished, but for the first time in his life, he had found an anchor. "Ready?" I whispered. He didn't speak. He simply kicked the door open. The man with the shears spun around, but Kenji was faster. He didn't use a gun. He moved like a shadow, his movements a blur of calculated violence. He disarmed the assassin with a single, brutal strike to the wrist, sending my shears clattering across the floor. I dove for Nina, shielding her with my body as Kenji pinned the assassin against my oak cutting table. "Who sent you?" Kenji roared, his hand tightening around the man's throat. The assassin laughed, a wet, gurgling sound. He looked past Kenji, straight at me. "The veins were just the distraction, Sloane. The Red Dragon doesn't care about suits. We care about the bloodline. Ask your king. Ask him who really signed your father's death warrant." The silence in the basement was heavier than the blizzard outside. The assassin lay slumped over my cutting table, the life draining out of him in a way that made the room feel smaller, colder. I held the silver locket in my palm, the metal biting into my skin. The photograph inside was unmistakable. A younger, more innocent Kenji was standing in a sun-drenched garden, his hand tucked into the palm of a man I saw every time I closed my eyes. My father. "You knew him," I whispered, the words echoing off the damp stone walls. "This wasn't just a business arrangement. You weren't just a client of his." Kenji didn't look at me. He was staring at the dead man, his jaw set so tight I thought his teeth might crack. Nina was sobbing into my shoulder, her small frame shaking with the kind of terror that never truly leaves a person. I ushered her into the back room, locking the door behind her before turning back to the Ghost King. "Explain this, Kenji, now, before I use those shears on you." Kenji finally turned, and for the first time, the King of Shadows looked vulnerable. "Your father didn't just design vaults, Sloane. He was the architect of my survival. When my father tried to break me to cure my touch aversion through trauma, your father was the only person who treated me like a human being. He used the logic of tailoring to teach me how to build a suit of armor around my mind. He told me that if the world couldn't touch me, they couldn't hurt me. Then why is he dead?" I stepped closer, the locket swinging between us like a pendulum. "If he was your mentor, why was he found in a gutter while your family rose to trillions? Because the syndicate found out he was building a back door into the main vault, a way to drain the Kuriyama wealth if they ever harmed me," Kenji rasped. He took a step toward me, his hand reaching out instinctively before he caught himself and pulled back. "My father ordered the hit. I was 17. I tried to stop it, but I was a prisoner in my own skin. I watched the car hit him, Sloane. I watched the man who taught me how to breathe die because he loved me more than he feared them. The air left my lungs in a sharp, painful burst. The justice loop I had been enjoying, the building, the diamonds, the revenge on Chloe, it all felt like a distraction from the truth. I wasn't just his designer, I was his penance. "You didn't find me by accident," I realized, the horror dawning on me. "You've been watching me for 3 years. You let me rot in this basement while you waited for the perfect moment to play. Hero, I waited until I was strong enough to kill the men who did it," Kenji said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "The Vane family were just the bankers. The Red Dragon, that's my father's inner circle. They're still alive, and they're coming for the only thing left of your father's legacy, you." Before I could process his words, the security monitors on the wall flickered. The Red Dragon wasn't just a metaphor. 6 men in crimson tactical gear were descending into the alleyway, carrying specialized breaching charges. "They're not here for a fitting," Kenji said, drawing a sleek, matte black pistol from his shoulder holster. He grabbed a roll of reinforced carbon fiber thread from my shelf, the strongest material I owned. "They're here to tie up the loose ends. Sloane, get Nina. We're going through the tunnel. Now." I grabbed my trauma bag and the gold coin, but as I reached the hidden door, a deafening explosion rocked the building. The front steel door flew off its hinges, and a canister of crimson gas hissed across the floor. The world returned in fragments, the scent of expensive sandalwood, the hum of a high-altitude air purifier, and the heavy, rhythmic throb of a sedative wearing off. I tried to lift my hand to my neck, but my arm felt like it was made of lead. I wasn't in my basement. I wasn't in a dungeon. I was lying in a bed with a thread count so high it felt like sliding onto a cloud. I sat up, the room spinning. It was a penthouse suite, encased in floor-to-ceiling glass that overlooked the shimmering, jagged skyline of Manhattan. "Nina!" My voice was a dry, raspy whisper. "She's in the room next door, eating crepes and watching cartoons," a voice answered from the shadows. Kenji sat in a velvet armchair in the corner, his tuxedo jacket discarded. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, revealing a fresh bandage where the assassin's blade had grazed him. He looked exhausted, his obsidian eyes rimmed with red. "The Red Dragon took you," he said, his voice devoid of its usual steel. "I had to burn 3 city blocks and call in every favor I've spent a decade building to get you back. You were gone for 6 hours. In that time, they didn't hurt you. They just waited." "Waited for what?" I asked, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. I felt the cold weight of the black diamond necklace still around my neck. For me to realize I can't protect you as a designer, Sloan. They know about my condition. They know that if they surround me, I'll fold. But they also know the law of the syndicate. A man's wife is untouchable by any hand but his own. He stood up and walked toward me, stopping just outside the boundary of his comfort zone. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a document embossed with the seal of the Kuriyama family. I filed the paperwork for a 3-month legal union, a fake engagement, followed by a private ceremony. It's the only suit I have left that can shield you. My father's circle won't touch the wife of the Ghost King. It would trigger a civil war they aren't ready for. I stared at him. My head throbbed. You want me to marry you? After you told me you watched my father die? After you turned my life into a target? I'm offering you a trade, Kenji said, his gaze fixed on mine. 3 months of your life for a lifetime of safety for Nina. I will provide the capital for you to rebuild your father's original label, Montgomery Silk. By the time we divorce, you will be the most powerful woman in fashion, and I will have finished my war. You'll have the name, the money, and the freedom you deserve. And what do you get, Kenji? He looked away, his jaw tightening. I get to sleep, knowing the only woman who ever looked at me without fear isn't lying in a gutter. The length logic of my life had shifted. I was no longer the girl in the basement. I was the armor for a man who couldn't be touched. I looked at the black diamonds, then at the document. Fine, I said, my voice hardening. But I have 3 conditions. 1, Nina never sees a gun again. 2, I handle the Vane family myself. And 3, I walked up to him, stepping directly into his personal space. I saw the flash of panic in his eyes, the subtle tremor in his hands, as his phobia flared. You stop hiding behind your shadow. If we're doing this, you learn to stand the touch of the woman you're claiming. I reached out and laid my palm flat against his chest, right over his heart. I felt the frantic, wild beat of it, like a trapped bird. The atmosphere in the penthouse shifted from a tense standoff to a frozen tomb. The intercom's mechanical voice echoed, and I felt the vibration of Kenji's heart under my palm accelerate into a frantic, jagged rhythm. His skin grew clammy, his allergy flaring as the presence of his father, the man who had turned his son into a masterpiece of trauma, pressed against the perimeter of our sanctuary. Sloan, get Nina. Go to the safe room. Do not come out until the air is clear, Kenji commanded, his voice regaining its lethal obsidian edge. I'm not a child you can tuck away, Kenji, I snapped, though the cold fear in my gut told me to run. If your father is the Red Dragon, then he's the one who killed my father. I want to look him in the eyes. Before he could protest, the heavy mahogany doors of the penthouse didn't open. They were held open by 2 men in crimson masks. Walking between them was a man who looked like an older, more decayed version of Kenji. Hiroshi Sato moved with a cane topped with a silver dragon's head, his presence sucking the oxygen out of the room. He didn't look at his son, his eyes, as milky and sharp as cracked pearls, fixed directly on me. So, Hiroshi rasped, his voice sounding like dry leaves skittering over a grave. The architect's daughter finally emerges from the basement. You have his hands, Sloan. I can see the calluses of a creator. You killed him, I said, my voice vibrating with a rage I didn't know I possessed. Hiroshi chuckled, a hollow sound. I liquidated an asset that had become a liability. Your father was a genius, but he suffered from the same disease as my son, sentimentality. He built the world's most secure vault for me, but he hid a dead man's switch in the blueprints, a secret code that could bankrupt the Kuriyama syndicate with a single keystroke. He died before he could tell me where it was hidden. He took a step closer, and Kenji immediately moved, placing his body between me and the old man. I could see the sweat dripping down Kenji's neck, his muscles locking in an agonizing fight against his phobia. Stay away from her, father, Kenji warned, his hand hovering over his holster. Or what, Kenji? You'll seize? You'll collapse? Hiroshi sneered, tapping his cane against the floor. I came to collect the debt. The code wasn't in a computer. Your father was old-fashioned. He believed in the living thread. He told me once that a master tailor never writes down the pattern. They weave it into the garment. Hiroshi's gaze moved to the black diamond necklace around my neck, then to the gold coin sitting on the side table. The debt is the code, Sloan. It's hidden in the one thing your father left behind. The one thing he knew you would keep. My mind raced. I thought of the basement, the old sketches, the vintage Dior gown I had been refurbishing. I thought of the secret patterns Kenji mentioned. I don't know what you're talking about, I lied, though a memory was beginning to surface. A specific stitch my father had taught me when I was 6, a pattern that made no sense visually but felt like a language under my fingers. You will remember, Hiroshi said, his tone turning clinical. Because if you don't find that code within 48 hours, I won't just kill your sister. I will dismantle the Montgomery name until not even a scrap of silk remains. Kenji, enjoy your wife. She is a very expensive ghost. As the red dragon vanished back into the shadows, Kenji collapsed into the armchair, his face pale as ash. I rushed to him, ignoring his flinch. Kenji, look at me. The code. It's not in a vault, it's in the silk. The clock on the penthouse wall didn't just tick, it felt like a guillotine blade, dropping 1 millimeter at a time. 48 hours. That was all Hiroshi Sato had given us before he erased my sister and the Montgomery name from existence. I sat at a glass-topped drafting table, the microscopic film from the locket projected onto a wall-sized screen. It wasn't just a map, it was a textile blueprint. My father had encoded the syndicate's offshore routing numbers into a series of embroidery stitches, a binary code written in silk. The code is too massive to transmit via a standard server, I said, my eyes burning from hours of analysis. I looked at Kenji, who was standing by the window, his silhouette sharp against the New York skyline. The Red Dragon monitors every signal leaving this building. If we try to upload this, they'll kill Nina before the first byte hits the cloud. Then we don't upload it, Kenji said, turning to face me. We broadcast it in plain sight. The plan was as insane as it was brilliant. NY Fashion Week was 40 hours away. As the new owner of the Vane showroom, I had the closing slot. We would weave the binary code into the high-contrast embroidery of my debut collection. Each dress would represent a fragment of the data. When the high-definition cameras of the world's media captured the runway, they would unknowingly act as our relay. I need every seamstress Kenji can find who doesn't know how to talk, I commanded. The next 36 hours were a blur of caffeine, needles, and the hum of sewing machines. We worked in a secure bunker beneath the penthouse. I didn't just design, I choreographed a digital heist in fabric. I used weighted hems made of copper-threaded silk to act as passive antennas, ensuring the cameras would pick up the shimmer of the code perfectly. As the night of the show arrived, the tension in the Bryant Park tent was thick enough to cut with shears. The elite of New York, including a disgraced Chloe Vane and a watchful, predatory Hiroshi Sato, sat in the front row. They thought they were watching a comeback. They didn't know they were watching a funeral. "You look like a queen, not a ghost," Kenji whispered behind the curtain. He reached out, his fingers hovering inches from my cheek. This time, I didn't wait. I moved forward and leaned my forehead against his. He didn't pull away. The tremor in his hands was there, but he stood his ground. "If this fails, Nina is gone," I whispered. "It won't fail. You're the architect's daughter. You were born for the stitch," he replied, his voice a low, steady anchor. The music started, a heavy, industrial beat that sounded like a ticking heart. The first model stepped onto the runway. She was wearing a gown of midnight blue, the hem swirling with silver embroidery that looked like traditional clouds. To the fashion critics, it was art. To the satellite I had rented through Kenji's backroom channels, it was the first 5 gigabytes of the Kuriyama bank codes. Model after model walked, the cameras flashing like 1,000 tiny suns. I watched Hiroshi from the wings. He was leaning forward, his eyes narrowed, his silver dragon cane tapping a restless rhythm. He knew something was happening, but he couldn't see the code in the beauty. As the final model, the showstopper, prepared to walk, my headset crackled. "Sloan, we have a problem. The Red Dragon's tech team has detected the satellite relay. They're jamming the signal. The last 10% of the code, it's not going through." I looked at the showstopper dress. It was a gown of pure, unadulterated white silk, meant to be the wedding dress of the collection. It held the master key, the final sequence that would unlock the vault. "They're cuting the power to the tent in 60 seconds, the voice warned. The lights flickered, the heavy industrial bass of the soundtrack stuttering as the Red Dragon's jamming signal tore through the tent's power grid. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. The world's elite, the media, and the monsters, all held in a momentary, suffocating darkness. I stepped out from the wings, the white silk gown feeling like liquid fire against my skin. The master key wasn't just in the embroidery, it was in the way the silver thread weave reacted to the infrared flashes of the press cameras. "Power's at 5%, Sloan. You have 30 seconds before we lose the relay." Kenji's voice crackled in my earpiece, strained and desperate. I didn't walk like a model. I walked like a woman reclaiming a throne. I marched to the very edge of the runway, stopping inches from where Hiroshi Sato sat. The old man rose from his seat, his silver dragon cane trembling in his grip. He looked at the gown, his milky eyes widening as he finally saw the living thread. He realized too late that the pattern wasn't just art. It was an execution. "Stop the show! Cut the cameras!" Hiroshi screamed, but his voice was drowned out by the thunderous applause of an audience that thought this was a scripted climax. I looked Hiroshi dead in the eye, my hand reaching up to the black diamond necklace. "The architect's debt isn't paid in blood, Hiroshi. It's paid in truth." With a sharp tug, I snapped the necklace. The black diamonds scattered across the runway like frozen tears. At that exact moment, the final flash of 100 cameras captured the iridescent glow of the white silk. The earpiece chirped, "Upload complete. The vault is open." Suddenly, every screen in the tent and every news tablet in the world switched from the runway to a scrolling ledger of the Kurayama Syndicate's illicit bank. Accounts, wire transfers, and the evidence of my father's murder. The Ghost King's wealth was vanishing in real time, redirected into a global trust for the families the syndicate had destroyed. You've ruined us!" Hiroshi lunged forward, swinging his heavy cane at my head, but he never connected. A hand clamped onto the silver dragon head mid-air. Kenji stepped out from the shadows of the stage, his face a mask of cold, liberated fury. He didn't seize, he didn't collapse. For the first time in his life, he was touching his father, his hand locked around the cane with bone-crushing strength. "The allergy is gone, father," Kenji whispered, his voice booming through the silent tent. "It turns out I wasn't allergic to people. I was just allergic to you." With a single, effortless shove, Kenji sent the old man reeling back into the front row. Security teams, not the syndicates, but federal agents triggered by the data leak, swarmed the tent. Chloe Vane tried to flee, but she was pinned against the velvet curtains, her gold dress finally revealed as a symbol of her fraud. Kenji walked toward me on the runway. The lights were dead now, the only glow coming from the emergency exit signs and the faint shimmer of my white gown. He stopped inches from me. The cameras were still clicking, capturing the most iconic image in New York history, the designer and the Mafia Boss, standing amid the wreckage of an empire. "Is Nina safe?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "She's waiting at the car. The red dragon has no head left to bite with," he replied. He looked down at his own hand, the one that had touched his father. It was steady. Then he looked at me. "The 3 months. The contract. I suppose it's void now. You have your father's name back. You have the millions. You're free." I looked at the cameras, then at the man who had risked everything to play the villain so I could be the hero. I reached out, my fingers tangling in the silk of his tie, the tie I had straightened in a cloakroom a lifetime ago. "I'm a designer, Kenji," I said, a small, triumphant smile playing on my lips. "I don't like unfinished work. And our final fitting? It isn't over yet." I pulled him down, and as his lips met mine, the Ghost King finally came home. Sloane risked her life to weave the truth into silk and save her sister. If you believe this abandoned hero finally earned her crown, hit the like button so her victory is never forgotten. Her story is just beginning.